This is the Truth Network.
The heart of every man craves a great adventure, but life doesn't usually feel that way. Jesus speaks of narrow gates and wide roads, but the masculine journey is filled with many twists and turns. So how do we keep from losing heart while trying to find the good way when life feels more like a losing battle than something worth dying for? Grab your gear and come on a quest with your band of brothers who will serve as the guides in what we call the masculine journey. The masculine journey starts here now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours, and I discovered during that quiet time, we always have what we call the cone of silence, which we didn't originate that. That was with Get Smart way back in the day.
Yeah, I still don't know what the cone of silence is here, but anyway.
But I've discovered I'm the world's worst lip reader.
I could be the world's worst lip speaker.
Oh, it could be, yeah. Well, no, it's haunted me a lot of my life, yeah. Yeah, when I was married, my wife used to say something to me, and I'd just kind of shake my head and say, yeah, okay, whatever. And that's probably why it used to be married.
That explains quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, but we're going to continue to talk about the topic of restoration. Yeah. And with the After Hours show, it's pretty much like an open forum, a lot where we just sit around and do what we do after the show, and we talk about the topic some more, and things in our life. And I guess one of the things that we didn't really get to cover as much in the show that I'd like to ask you guys about is, what's some other things that can be restored, or what's some restorations that have happened for you in your life?
Well, right off the top of my head, when I used to think about restoration, when I was a preacher, back when I didn't know very much, restoration was something that was going to happen in heaven, far off in the distance, something like that. Restoration was what happened when somebody had been backslidden and they'd fallen away from the church, and then they were coming back. And then when they came down front, we had a restoration. We restored them to the right fellowship of Christendom. And now it's just, I'm just teasing because that's the way everybody used to say it where I was at. But that's, if you talked about restoration, it was, brother so-and-so got restored the other day. Well, okay, what did he get restored from? And I get it. I understand. He's coming back to church. All right, that's awesome. Love that. That's a good thing for him. But the restoration that needed to happen in his heart might have been a very distant from that. He came back to church, and hopefully now he can get some more restoration. And so one of the things that I've gotten restoration from was, when I stepped away from the ministry several years ago, I pretty much told God I would never do ministry again. And I'm sure he said, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's your plan.
Yeah. And then several years down the road, after a lot of my heart was restored and a lot of other things were fixed, God prompted me to, start doing ministry again. And that's kind of how we're here, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jim, what about you? What's some restoration for your life that...
What immediately came to mind, hopefully this is God, but this was while I was in divinity school. And I won't say I was a new Christian, but I was newly pursuing God after really being a carnal Christian all of my life. And I was about halfway through, and I was so deeply involved in a relationship I should not have been that I took a semester off. And this is restoration on two levels. Long story short, when I wanted to come back, it wasn't an automatic. I had to be grilled by 3 staff members, one of whom didn't want me back, one of whom did, and one who was brand new that didn't know me from Adam. So I said, okay, God, that's fair. And ultimately, I was restored. But driving home one day, the person that, and I love her to death, she's a great person, but she didn't like me because I played the conservative card a lot, and she was kind of the female side of baptistry there. But in any case, the bottom line there was she had said something that just cut me to the heart and said, we don't want you to embarrass the cause of Christ.
Wow.
And I was driving home, and I said, God, if I'm going to do that, take me out right now. I don't want to live. And I went. They did let me back in. Maybe a month later, I was driving on the same road, same place, and I thought about that. And I clearly heard from God that, Jim, you embarrass me every day, but I love you. Mm-hmm. Which, I don't think I'm embarrassing him, but he said that because he knew exactly what to say to capture my heart, to restore my heart in that time when I was really feeling like, I'm too broken to do this. We all are.
Yeah. Guys, what about you?
Well, like we were talking before, all different various areas. So I'll go into the work life then. Started off my career and was very good at what I did. Thought I wanted to go, be like Mr. Technical. And then as I learned other techniques, work with people, we were doing a lot. We brought in Singajitsu, which is they were the men when it came to lean manufacturing company. They were former Toyota execs doing.
They're not the
stuff.
UFC fighting stuff.
Yeah. Well, you would think so sometimes because they yelled at you pretty hard because nobody ever wanted to do what they told you to do because you thought you knew better, right? But I learned all this lean manufacturing. So I'm like, man, I love this stuff. Oh, now I want to go in a different direction. So every time I keep thinking, oh, I know what I want to do. And then I did that for a long time in my career. And I learned new stuff from other people. It's called Toyota Kata. And what we're doing is all this time. And it's like one thing on top of another, learning the whole time through this journey. And each time I'm thinking, okay, this is the direction I want to go in my life. And this is what I want to do in my career. And it takes certain things, disruptions that have happened. And I think, oh man, no, I'm really horrible at this. There were things that would happen in those experiences that would just take me down. And it's like, oh man, I'm just a big failure here. And I just, you keep punishing yourself. And then through another failure and then working through it, there became that healing and finally being restored into, okay, I got a new focus. I know where I'm going again. And it's like, it happens without you like planning it. It happens without you knowing all the little steps are happening because you still think you're in the old one possibly when you're new one, because I'm not going to try to pose here. And this whole message, Darren, I'm glad you keep explaining it every week because I need to keep that in my mind because these steps and what's going on, I'm like, man, how can I truly reflect and understand where I've been and how this has been in my life? Because it's like trying to draw things out of me, which has been great. I love it because it's like getting fathered, and it's wonderful. And so I'm trying to relive all these things in my life. And okay, I'm starting to connect more dots. I haven't connected a lot of them, but in that work life, there's that constant message and pounding that you're not adequate, you're not good enough, because there's something that's going to go wrong at work. Mm-hmm. And there's somebody that's going to be against you, and somebody's going to be trying to take you down because they've got to prop themselves up by taking you down. And being in this message, as we were saying earlier, Andy, it's helpful. And to be able to go through that and be restored and say, I'm just fine, because now I am much less subject to being taken down and being hurt by others, because I'm like, it just doesn't matter. It rolls off. I'm going in a direction and I'm happy with it. And if it changes, I'm happy with it. And I'm just comfortable in that skin now.
I've had a couple times work-wise, as you mentioned that I was thinking back, there was a season that I owned my own company. I was a part owner of a company, and you'd think that, that would bring a lot of freedom.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. In my case, it really didn't. It brought a lot of lack of joy, and when I was able to move into a place where I actually work for somebody again. I left my own company and went to work for somebody else. I got back to remembering why I loved building houses. You know, the excitement of somebody when they get their first home, or maybe it's their last home that, you know, they're planning on dying there. You know, just you're part of a significant part of their life with them. You know, and just the joy that comes from sharing that, sharing a part of their story and hopefully being a positive part of that. You know, God's restored that for me a couple times in my career, and it's been, wow, thank you. You know, just when I think maybe I need to find something else to go do, you know, maybe I can move into a different industry. For whatever reason, he brings me back and says, no, your heart is alive here because you get to share in these people's stories. You know, and I'm just so grateful that he's done that career-wise. There's been some other stuff for me, which we'll talk about a little bit later if we get to it. But Andy, what about you?
So probably with me, it was just a restoration of adventure and also more of a trust in him. So, you know, when I was separated from my wife, that was when I went in this discovery process, and for first couple of years, it was just learning. But there came a point in time where I was disgruntled. I wanted to do something different, both in career, but I also felt like God, the dreams that he put in my heart to share what I'd learned through this, I wanted to do that. And I didn't really know how, but I knew that it impacted me. So about the same time, it's cool what he did. I took this job with a company that I actually had to get out in front of people. And I'm not a talkative person or whatever, but I had to get out in front, sell a product. So that really stretched me, and that was a sense of adventure. Well, I got that desire from that enticement from the adventure talked about, you know, in Wild at Heart. So that spurred me on there, but it dovetailed so nicely in the fact of you guys about the same time invited me to join you on the radio show and boot camps, and it really, I mean, that got me out there again to talk in front of people, and it was really a stretching time, but really I came alive again. I mean, and all this stuff with you guys around me and hearing your stories, I had stuff to pull from and when I felt like I was being overwhelmed, I heard your testimonies of how God had came through for you and the first time you spoke at a boot camp or whatever it was. So that whole sense of adventure and that restoration to me, it took me back a lot to my childhood, to where you feel like anything was impossible, that you could overcome, that you could do whatever, you know, that was put in your heart to do.
You said something that hooked me there, that I want to ask a question. You said basically that you were really being stretched, but that's when you came alive. Do we ever come alive when we're not being stretched?
I think we're just, it puts us to sleep. It puts us, there's death in repetitiveness or the same old comfort level. I mean, I think comfort is where I was at for so many years, and comfort is great, and that's what I thought my heart wanted because it was nice and easy and protected, but I was dying inside.
Well, we put ourselves in this cocoon. We spin this cocoon around us to keep us comfortable, but it chokes out the light, it chokes out the life, it chokes out everything else. Along with it, you know, yeah, it keeps out the bad a lot of times, but it also chokes out all the good.
Yeah, and then where I'm at now is moving beyond improving processes. What it's all about now is coaching and leading others to be great leaders. So, it's like you said, Jim, what you find is instead of trying to, okay, we got to improve this process, my whole focus is on trying to improve that person, on improving the process, or improving that person to improve other people. So if it's a leader of leaders, now I got to go in and understand how they're thinking and things of that nature. And what really came alive here and during this last 7 years of adventure has been when you focus on that person. What really helps me out is, okay, if you've got that target and right in the middle and the center is that green area. That green area is that area where it's like, oh, that's easy to do. It's not a stretch. It's not a challenge. People get bored, and when they get bored, what happens? They get into other things, right? That's when you lose control of your life and do those other, drugs and whatever else happens to take control. If you get stretched out too far and it's too hard and too harsh, a lot of those things in life come in like that. At work, it just becomes different types of scenarios, but then you're trying to find that sweet spot in between where it's, I'm stretching you far enough that you're not bored, but not overstretching you, that you're going to go critical crazy. But what it's all about is you constantly push towards pushing them too far just to find out how far, okay, I went too far, back off a little bit. that's a sweet spot to be in, because people love that. They grow in that, and they move so much. And just to watch people grow in that, I never thought when I started my career I'd even care about stuff like this. And I just love doing it now. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say you didn't want to stretch them too far that they snapped.
Yeah,
that's the analogy you'd go with. Andy, we have a clip we had for this actual segment. You want to go ahead and set up the clip?
Sure. So this is from the Shack. Mac is he's a father who's lost his daughter, and he goes to a shack to he's enticed into that from God, but it's because he's really hung up and not able to really forgive who had harmed his daughter in that shack, actually killed her. But this part of the story, though, is more about what he went through as a kid, and his dad was overbearing, and there's flashbacks to where he was a kid and how his dad had beat him up and stuff. And this is a reconciliation in heaven between he and his dad.
What are those?
What? Who? Papa's children from every tongue, tribe, and nation. What you call personality and emotion, we see as color and light.
What's happening with that one? Why is he focused on us?
He's focused on you.
Dad? Mac, I'm so sorry for everything. I was blind and I couldn't see you. I couldn't see anyone. I know. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Son, I forgive you. You've become the father I could never be. I'm so proud of you. Can you ever forgive me? I'll see you again, son.
The reason I wanted to thank you, Andy. The reason I wanted to play that clip, I think God cares about our work. I think God cares about all these other things that we care about, and He knows how important it is to our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
But we're born out of relationship,
Right.
right? And so to me, it seems like God has a special desire to restore relationship.
Well, it's that. I mean, biblically, He says that.
Yeah.
In the end times, He'll restore the hearts of fathers to their sons and sons to their fathers, and different things like that. It's an extremely biblical idea, and that is, out of all of the restoration that I experience, the most rewarding are those that are involving relationships, and. So, you and I have had issues with each other and trusting one another at times, and the restoration of that relationship is one of the single greatest gifts that I've received. And so, that I'm thrilled that you picked up on that. I don't think I was smart enough to, but I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately is about restoring the relationship of God
absolutely
with us, and that He knows. But to your point, there are other things that are also important. He's not just worried about my relationship with Him. He actually cares about my relationship with you and Jim and Andy and my wife and my kids and my employees or whatever.
I think that's exactly right. I think that sometimes those other relationships, if they're not dealt with, and God knows if we don't deal with them, it will impact our relationship with Him, right? Because ultimately, when you and I have been working through things and we're getting to a better place, at some level it's about, God, am I trusting what you're telling me to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right?
Do I trust my heart with you, God?
Yeah.
enough to risk it with that person?
Exactly.
Do I trust you to be there in that relationship, or do I just focus on that other person's behavior that hurts me?
Mm-hmm. And I think it is about relational restoration. For me, one of the greatest gifts, I was thinking this week, and Jim, I'll jump to you in here in a second, a couple of the greatest gifts I've been given in restoration has to do with, as I talked about last week on the normal podcast, the normal radio show, was healing with my parents. But I didn't realize how many layers of hurt and expectation and all these other things that got in the way of how I saw them. And as God's peeled things back and he's healed some things in me and he's helped me see them differently. When I think of my parents now, it's just a joyful remembrance. Yeah, those other things still happened. Those still happen, but they don't really matter anymore because the relationship was restored. We talked in the earlier show about, people that's helped you along the way, and you guys have all helped me. But there was a counselor, Darren and I both know, and you know him, Jim, Kim Whitehurst. One of the best things they ever told me was, we all have two fathers. And I'm thinking, okay, earthly father, heavenly father. He said, no, that's not what I mean. That's true. What I mean is, in your earthly father, you have two fathers. You have the one that you thought you should have had and the one that you had. And once I could reconcile with that, I could step in and see my dad as a broken man that was dealing with things the best that he could, which led to healing, which led to restoration, which led to joy. And it was all about healing that relationship, and it affects how I deal with my kids. Because I want to be very intentional now in different ways than I ever was before.
Well, as I start falling apart, I lose something. So what I was going to comment on Darren went away. But talking about relationships, if we're not helping with relationships, whether it's ours or intervening for others, we're not helping. Because the only thing we're going to take out of this life is our relationships with God and with others. And those will be forever. And one of the things that many of us were hurting while you two guys were at odds. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't do anything to change that because God had to get hold of your hearts. And I wonder if now that relationship isn't much stronger for going through that time of animosity.
I think what it definitely has is a much better foundation than what it ever had before. I mean, we had a great friendship. We have a great friendship, but I think we're learning to be friends in a much better, healthier way.
Yeah. Than
we had been before.
Yeah.
And I think we're also both in a lot different places.
Yeah, and different weight class.
Yeah,
too.
The pounds brought a couple friends with it. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think a better foundation is the perfect way to put that. I think before we were putting the ministry ahead of friendship, ahead of community, and we had some pretty rough things to go through because of that. And this, restoration has brought that into focus for all of us, that we were almost worshiping each other or worshiping, the ministry instead of, and please don't lose your mind, we're not talking about instead of God, but that we had kind of made, the ministry the primary thing.
Happens all the time, though, these days, too.
It does, and churches fall because of it, right. And ministries fall because of it, and because of, our stupidity, we hurt each other. We hurt people that, loved us and wanted to be in relationship with us through boot camps and different things, and that's, and Jim said it well, when we were not doing well with each other, it hurt a lot of other people. Mm-hmm. And I think it hurt God's heart, even more. And so, but now, God is by far number one, not that he ever wasn't before, but I think there's a lot of times we didn't act like he was. And ministry is a byproduct of community. So,
yeah, without community, it just doesn't. It would be hollow.
yes.
And you said it in that the important thing was the relationships. And the most important one is the vertical one. And we all are guilty of setting up idols every day, something we'll put before our relationship with God, before our relationship with others. And God is in the business of dismantling those idols. And in the process, us, to put us back together and make us better than we were.
Yeah, I'd love to skip that whole dismantling stage. If we could just go, I'd even be okay at disruption right to healing and you know.
Do you ever feel like you're Humpty Dumpty?
Yeah, I've been put back together so many times. I think it's numbered, you know, all the pieces that go back together.
You're like an old log cabin at this point.
Yeah, it's like the same puzzle you put together every week. You know how it goes together. And God's continuing to restore, and I think that's the whole point is He continues to go through that we have to be willing to go there with Him. We have to be willing to trust His heart is better for us than our own heart is for us. You know, believe it or not.
Not only that, but his that what he says about us is true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Truer than what we believe about ourselves, or what others have told us about ourselves. And so, you know, while your closest friend and you are not getting along, or your wife and you are not getting along, it's pretty easy for Satan to get in there and say, "See, I told you that was true about you." Got to keep listening to God.
And you do, and that's where you need to go this week, and that's where we need to go this week and say, God, where are you currently working on restoring our heart? Where are some ways that I'm getting in the way? Help me to get out of the way, that you can love me through this, and we can get to that place on the other side that I can be released to go love on others the way that you call me to be loved, to love on others. And go to masculinejourney.org and register for the boot camp, because we'd love to see you coming up April 2nd through 5th. Come see us, spend some time with us, and let's have some fun together.